no family, sans famille. All character and place names in this translation have been restored to their original French form. Hector Mallet, born in 1830 in northwestern France, was a novelist loved by French readers. His novels, such as Sans Famille, Nobody's Boy, En Famille, Nobody's Girl, Pompon and Romain Calbris, are all wholesome and engaging. He passed away in 1890. Among Mallet's novels, Sans Famille is the most famous. It won an award from the French Academy of Literature, and has been translated and published worldwide multiple times. For over 100 years it has become a beloved companion for French and European children. Not only children but also parents, teachers, and all those who love and care for children have read it with great enthusiasm. Through its captivating story, it addresses many timeless questions about raising and educating children. Sans Famille tells the story of a boy without parents or relatives who joins a traveling circus of dogs and monkeys. Later, he becomes the leader of this troupe, wandering across France, getting imprisoned in England, and ultimately finding his mother and younger brother. Remy, the boy, grows up in hardship. He encounters people from all walks of life, experiencing both deception and kindness. He earns his living through hard work first under the guidance of an experienced and virtuous old man, the Tallys, and later by leading his own troupe. There are times when he and his group wander for days without food, times when he nearly freezes to death, times when he is trapped in a flooded mine for weeks, and even times when he is wrongly accused and imprisoned. Yet, no matter where he is, or what difficulties he faces, he remains true to the values taught by Vitalis: honesty, courage, self-respect, kindness, a love for work and a refusal to beg or deceive. He is always grateful, and strives to be useful to others. Alongside Remy, there is his clever and talented friend Mattia, the intelligent and loyal dog Cappy, and the quick-witted yet endearing monkey Joli Coeur. The people and animals in the story are brought to life vividly, making it a delightful read for young audiences. Through Remy's adventurous journey, the book praises labor, self-reliance, and perseverance. It fosters resilience, ingenuity, and appreciation for the arts, while encouraging true friendship. It reflects the precarious and dangerous lives of miners and urban workers in capitalist society. At the same time, it showcases the reality that compassion, gratitude, and solidarity belong to the working class. The book also beautifully portrays nature and rural and urban life, enriching the reader's understanding while keeping them engaged in the story. However, Sans Famille is not without flaws. Written by a bourgeois author, albeit a progressive one, the novel inevitably carries some of his social biases. The author idealizes the wealthy and respectable, giving Remy a rich mother and a vast inheritance so that, when he reunites with her, he has the means to repay kindness. It suggests that without immense wealth, one cannot properly express gratitude, a notion that modern readers may reject. Throughout the story, Remy respects laborers and kind-hearted people, but he admires those with high social status and refined manners even more. His dream to live a life of luxury like them is a limitation of the novel that today's young readers will likely not endorse. The translator hopes that while reading this book, readers will not only find enjoyment, but also learn valuable lessons. Sans Famille is a literary masterpiece, but it also provides insights into what qualities to admire, and what social biases to be cautious of in personal development and child rearing. Part 1. In the village I was a foundling. Yet, until I was 8 years old, I believed I had a mother like any other child. Every time I cried, there was always a gentle woman who would hold me in her arms, soothing me with tender lullabies until my tears stopped flowing. Every night before I slept, this same woman would kiss me, and when the cold December winds blew snowflakes against the frosted windows, she would warm my feet in her loving hands and sing me a song. A melody I still vaguely remember. Whenever I tended the dairy cow along grassy roads or among wild shrubs, and a sudden storm caught me off guard, she would come, running, wrap me in her thick wool skirt, and use it to shield me from the wind and rain. Whenever I quarreled with my friends, she would console me, asking me to share my grievances with her. Almost always, she found the right words to comfort me, or to express her sympathy. Through these moments and countless others, her voice, her gaze, her caresses, even her gentle reprimands, I was convinced she was my mother. I learned that she was not my real mother, but only my foster mother. In this way, my village was called Chevenon. To be precise, it was not the place where I was born, as I had no homeland, no birthplace, just as I had no parents. Chevenon was simply the village where I grew up, where I spent my childhood. It was one of the poorest villages in central France, not because the villagers were lazy, but because the land was barren. The topsoil was thin, and good crops required manure and lime, both scarce commodities in the region. Thus, instead of cultivated fields, there were patches of wild grass and thickets everywhere. Beyond them lay barren moorlands. On these high moors, bitter winds howled, stunting the growth of the few shrubs that managed to cling to life. Their twisted branches swayed violently, as if writhing in agony. If one wanted to see lush greenery, one had to descend from the plateau into the river valleys. There, towering chestnut and sturdy oak trees thrived. The house where I spent my early childhood stood in such a valley, along the banks of a rushing stream that fed into one of the tributaries of the Loire River. Until I was 8, I had never seen a man inside our home, though my foster mother was not a widow. Her husband was a stone mason who worked in Paris, like most of the men in our village. Since I had begun to understand the world around me, I had never seen him return. Occasionally, when his friends came back home, they would bring news. "Hey, Barbering, your husband is doing well. He asked me to tell you that his work is going great. And he sends you this money. Count it." That was all. These few words were enough to satisfy Mother Barbering. Her husband was healthy. He was earning money. What more could she ask for? One cold November evening, a stranger arrived at our gate. I was breaking firewood on the doorstep when he stopped and peered in, asking if this was the home of Madame Barbering. I invited him in. He pushed the gate open, making the latch creak, and slowly walked across the yard. I had never seen anyone so covered in mud before. Wet and dry clumps of dirt were caked all over him, from head to toe. One glance was enough to tell that he had traveled far on muddy roads. Hearing our voices, Mother Barbering came running out. Just as the man stepped over the threshold, she arrived, and they met face to face. "I bring news from Paris," the man said. His words were simple, ones we had heard many times before, but his voice sounded different this time. It was not like when someone would say, "Your husband is doing well. His work is good." Mother Barbering clasped her hands together and cried out, "Oh dear God, something has happened to my Jerem, hasn't it?" "Yes, but don't be too alarmed. He's injured. That's true, but he's not dead. Though he will be crippled. He's still in the hospital. I was in the bed next to him, and since I was coming home, he asked me to stop by and tell you. I can't stay long, I still have 3 miles to go, and it's getting dark." Mother Barbering wanted to hear more details, so she invited him to stay for dinner. She told him the roads were terrible, and people had been talking about wolves in the forest. It would be safer to wait until morning. The man sat beside the fire and, while eating, recounted how the accident had happened. A scaffolding had collapsed, nearly crushing Barbering. The construction foreman claimed that Barbering had no business being in that area. so he refused to pay him any compensation. It's really unlucky for barbering, poor fellow. Really unlucky. The man kept repeating, shaking his head as he warmed his stiff pants near the fire. Still, I advise him to file a lawsuit against the contractor. That will cost a lot of money. True, but if he wins, it'll be worth it. Mother Barbering wanted to go to Paris, but that was not an easy task. The journey was long and costly. The next morning, she and I went to the village to consult the priest. The priest advised her to wait and see if going there would be of any real benefit. He wrote to a clergyman at the hospital where Barbering was staying. A few days later, a letter arrived, stating that she need not come. She only needed to send money for her husband to pursue legal action. Time passed. Occasionally, letters arrived, each one urging her to send more money. The last letter was the most pressing of all, insisting that if she had no more money, she should sell the dairy cow to cover the expenses. Those who have lived in the countryside among farmers will understand the anguish contained in those words. Asterisk, asterisk. Sell the dairy cow. Asterisk, asterisk. To a biologist, a cow is merely a ruminant animal. To a traveler, it is an image that adds charm to the landscape. Its black snout glistening with dew as it raises its head from the grass. To city children, it is the source of milk, coffee cream, and cheese. But to a farmer, a cow is far more precious. No matter how poor a family is, no matter how many children they have, if they have a dairy cow, they won't starve. A simple rope tied around its horns allows even a small child to lead it along grass-covered roadsides when no one claims ownership. By evening, the family has butter for soup and milk for their potatoes. Parents and children, young and old, all rely on the cow for sustenance. Thanks to our dairy cow, my foster mother and I lived sufficiently well. We hardly ever ate meat, yet we did not feel deprived. Not only was the cow our source of nourishment, but she was also our friend, a part of our family. Truly, do not think that cows are stupid creatures. Quite the contrary, they are intelligent, and if trained properly, they can develop remarkable qualities. We talked to our cow, petted her, and she understood us. In return, with her large round eyes, so gentle and expressive, she let us know her desires and emotions. In short, we loved her, and she loved us in return. And yet, we had to part with her. Only by selling the dairy cow could my foster father feel satisfied. A cattle trader came to our house. He examined our cow, Rusette, thoroughly, running his hands over her, all the while shaking his head as if displeased. He repeated countless times that she was just a poor man's cow, hard to resell. He claimed she gave little milk and poor quality butter. After much haggling, he finally agreed to buy her, but only, he said, out of kindness, to help my foster mother, whom he found to be an honest woman. Poor Risette. It seemed she understood everything because she stubbornly refused to leave her stall. Bellowing loudly, the cattle trader handed me his leather whip and said, "Boy, go around back and drive her out." But Mother Barbering intervened. "No, let me handle it." She gently took hold of the rope and coaxed her. "Come on, my girl, let's go." And so, Risette followed her without further resistance. Once on the road, the trader tied her to the back of his cart, forcing her to walk behind the horse. We returned inside, but for a long time, we could still hear her mournful cries. And so, there was no more milk, no more butter. Breakfast was now just a piece of dry bread. Dinner was potatoes with salt. A few days after selling Rusette, it was Fat Tuesday, the last day of feasting before Lent. The previous year, my foster mother had prepared a grand meal of pancakes and fried dough for the occasion. I ate so much that it delighted her. But that was when we still had our cow. So we had milk for the batter and butter for frying. Now that Risette was gone, there was no milk, no butter, and no Fat Tuesday feast. I sadly resolved not to remind her of it, so she wouldn't feel even more sorrow. But my foster mother had a surprise for me. She had borrowed some milk from the neighbors and even managed to get a little butter. When I came home at noon, she was already preparing the batter. "Oh, flour!" I exclaimed in amazement. "Yes, flour, and the best kind too. Smell how fragrant it is." I didn't dare ask her what it was for. I tried to pretend I had forgotten it was Fat Tuesday, so she wouldn't feel bad. She saw through me and asked, "What do people make with flour?" Bread. And what else? Porridge. And what else? I don't know. Oh, but you do know. You're a good boy, so you won't say it. You know today is Fat Tuesday, a day for pancakes and fried dough. But you saw we had no milk, no butter. So you kept quiet, didn't you? Oh, Mother. I anticipated this. So I made sure your Fat Tuesday wouldn't be gloomy. That day felt so long. I checked on the batter every chance I got, but she warned me. If you keep doing that, the batter won't rise properly. Finally, evening arrived. I helped my foster mother prepare the fire. Ensuring the flames were strong, she melted the butter in the pan, and the wonderful aroma filled the kitchen. Just as we were about to start frying, heavy footsteps sounded on the threshold. The door swung open. A man in a white work coat, carrying a large cane, stood in the doorway. "What's this?" "A feast," he asked gruffly. My foster mother gasped. "Jerem, is that you?" She grabbed me by the shoulders and pushed me forward. "Your father is here." I stepped toward him, eager to embrace him, but he held me back with his cane. "And who is this boy?" he demanded. "This is Remy." "Yes, I know. But that means—" He hesitated before blurting out, "Ah, so he's not mine." He glared at me, and then at my foster mother. That night, there were no pancakes or fried dough. The pan was put aside, the butter and milk forgotten. A new presence had entered our home, one that made everything feel colder. 2. The foster father. I stepped toward him, eager to embrace him, but he held me back with his cane. "And who is this boy?" he demanded. "This is Remy." "Yes, I know. But that means—" He hesitated before blurting out, "Ah, so he's not mine." He glared at me, and then at my foster mother. That night, there were no pancakes or fried dough. The pan was put aside, the butter and milk forgotten. A new presence had entered our home, one that made everything feel colder. I had never imagined what a father was like. I vaguely thought a father was simply like a mother, only with a deeper voice. But now, seeing this man, this father, I felt nothing but fear. When I tried to hug him, he pushed me away with his cane. Why? When I hugged Mother Barbering, she never pushed me away. Instead, she would lift me into her arms, holding me tight. He sat at the table and began eating, devouring everything my foster mother had prepared for the holiday meal. I stood in silence, barely touching my food. "You don't seem hungry," he said, eyeing me. "I'm not," I whispered. "Then go to bed, and sleep immediately, or else I'll be angry." Mother Barbering looked at me and signaled with her eyes that I should obey. I quickly removed my clothes and climbed into bed. But I couldn't sleep. I lay still, facing the wall, trying to make sense of what had just happened. How could this man be my father? A father should be kind, not frightening. He should love his child, not push him away. I had just begun to doze off when I felt his presence near me. He whispered, "Are you asleep?" I remained silent. "He's already sleeping," Mother Barbering said. "He always falls asleep right away." "Good, because I don't want him hearing our conversation." "What is it you want to say?" My lawsuit failed. The judge ruled that I was responsible for my own accident. The contractor doesn't owe me a cent. Then what will we do? We will starve. Jerome, please, don't say that. We have no money, no food, and no income. You sold the cow, and now we have nothing left. And on top of it all, you kept this boy instead of sending him to the orphanage as I told you. I couldn't do that. He's not even your child. But I raised him like he was my own. That was a mistake. He should have gone to the orphanage. I was about to send him, but then he fell ill. How could I abandon a sick child? And after he recovered, he never really got better. He kept falling ill, one sickness after another. I feared he would die if I sent him away, but he didn't die. And now we're stuck with him. What if his real parents come looking for him? They won't. If they cared, they would have found him by now. But what if they do? Shouldn't we be prepared? If they come, I'll tell them to check the orphanage. That's where I'm sending him first thing tomorrow. No, Jerome, please don't. Why not? We can't afford to keep him. I'm injured and can't work. Do you want us both to starve? But he's a good boy, he's smart, hardworking, and kind. He'll help us. Help us? He's just a child. He can't earn a living. But one day his parents may come for him. And if they do, they'll reward us for taking care of him. You still believe that nonsense? Yes, I do. His clothes were fine when we found him. He must be from a wealthy family. Or maybe they're dead. If they're alive, I know they'll return for him. You're being foolish. I'll take him to the orphanage tomorrow morning. End of discussion. I had been holding back tears, that now they streamed down my face. I turned toward Mother Barbering and sobbed. You won't send me away, will you? She rushed to my side and held me. No, my child, I won't let them take you. She stroked my hair and kissed me, whispering soothing words. Sleep, my little one. I promise I won't let him send you away. I held on to her tightly, afraid she would leave me. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I fell asleep in her arms. 3. The traveling circus of Vitalis. Surely I had spent a restless night, tossing and turning in my anxiety and fear. When I awoke the next morning, my first instinct was to feel my bed and look around to reassure myself that I had not been taken away in the night. Throughout the morning, my foster father, Jerome Barbering, said nothing to me. I started to hope that he had changed his mind, perhaps persuaded by my foster mother's pleas. Maybe I would be allowed to stay after all. But as the village clock struck noon, Jerome called me sharply. Put on your cap and follow me. Terrified, I turned to Mother Barbering, seeking her help. She gestured discreetly for me to obey, but also reassured me with her eyes. I followed Barbering in silence. The road to the town hall was long, and my mind raced with thoughts of what was to come. Was he really taking me to the orphanage? Should I run away? But where would I go? At first, Jerome walked ahead, not speaking to me. But then he slowed his pace and grabbed my wrist firmly. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Through the village, people turned to stare. They whispered among themselves as they saw the gruff man leading a frightened child by the wrist. Some looked at me with pity. Others merely shrugged. As we passed a small cafe, a man standing in the doorway called out, "Hey, Barbering, where are you taking that boy?" "To the mayor's office," Barbering grumbled. "Come in and have a drink first." Barbering hesitated for a moment, then dragged me inside with him. Inside, seated at a table, was an old man with a long white beard, dressed in a strange coat with fur lining. He had a large hat decorated with colorful feathers and carried a walking stick taller than himself. Around his feet lay 3 dogs, and perched on his shoulder was a small monkey wearing a tiny red jacket. I had never seen anyone dressed like that before. He looked like a character from a storybook. Barbering and the cafe owner sat down and began speaking, but my attention was fixed on the old man. He was watching me too. his eyes filled with curiosity. "Is this the boy you're taking to the mayor?" the old man finally asked. "Yes," Barbering replied gruffly. The old man looked me up and down, as if assessing me. "You're struggling with this child, aren't you?" "It's not my child," Barbering growled. "He's a burden. I can't afford to keep him." The old man stroked his beard. "What if I took him instead?" Barbering looked at him in surprise. "You want to take him?" "I am in need of an apprentice," the old man said. "The boy looks strong enough." "But what would he do?" "He would help with my performances," the old man explained. "I trained dogs and a monkey to perform tricks. The boy could learn as well." Barbering hesitated. "I would pay you," the old man added. "Not much, but enough. I'll give you 40 francs for the boy." I gasped. He was talking about me as if I were an object. Barbering rubbed his chin, considering the offer. 40 francs, you say?" "Yes. I'll take care of him, feed him and train him. He'll be my apprentice." Barbering glanced at me and then at the old man. "Fine," he said finally. He reached out, and the old man placed 4 shiny silver coins in his palm. And just like that, my fate was decided. Barbering had sold me to a stranger. 4. A new life on the road. Barbering had just sold me like one would sell an animal. I stood there frozen, unable to fully grasp what had just happened. I turned to look at Mother Barbering, but she was not there. She had been sent away earlier that morning, likely so she wouldn't interfere. The old man, now my master, turned to me. "Well, boy, your name is Remy, isn't it?" I nodded. "My name is Vitalis. From now on, you'll travel with me and my troop." I looked at the dogs and the monkey. They were my new companions. "Come along," Vitalis said, picking up his walking stick. "We have a long journey ahead." Barbering had already turned his back and was leaving. I wanted to call out to him, to plead with him to take me back, but I knew it was useless. With one last glance at the village where I had spent my childhood, I followed the old man down the road. We walked in silence for some time. Vitalis walked with a confident stride, his long coat swaying with each step. The dogs followed, closely, well-trained, and the monkey sat atop his shoulder. After a while, he finally spoke. "You'll like being with us," he said. "We're free. We travel, and we perform for people. You'll learn many things, and you won't be lonely." I remained silent. How could I not feel lonely? I had just lost my home, my foster mother, and everything I knew. Vitalis seemed to understand. "You'll get used to it," he reassured me. "Let me introduce you to your new friends. This white dog is Cappy. He is the leader of the group. He's smart, obedient, and he'll help you adjust. That black one is Sabino, playful and mischievous. The gray one is Dulce, gentle and kind." Then, he gestured to the small monkey sitting on his shoulder. "And this here is Jolika. He's as naughty as he is clever." Jolika chatted excitedly and performed a small somersault, making me smile despite myself. Vitalis smiled too. "Ah, you see? It won't be so bad." We walked until evening. My feet ached, and my stomach growled with hunger. I had never walked such a long distance before. Finally, we stopped in a small clearing. Vitalis opened a bag and pulled out a loaf of bread. He tore it into pieces and handed one to me. "It's not much," he said, "but we make do with what we have." I ate in silence, watching as he fed the dogs and the monkey before eating his own portion. When night fell, he gathered some leaves to make a bed for us under a tree. "Tonight, we sleep under the stars," he said. "Tomorrow we perform, and you'll see how we earn our bread." I lay down on the makeshift bed, staring at the sky. The stars twinkled above, but they did little to comfort me. Would I ever see Mother Barbering again? Would I ever have a real home? I didn't know. All I knew was that my life had changed forever. On the road the next morning, I woke up feeling stiff and sore from sleeping on the ground. The cool morning air made me shiver. But Vitalis was already up, packing our belongings. "Time to get moving," he said cheerfully. We continued our journey, walking along winding country roads. The dogs trotted alongside us, and Jolika perched happily on Vitalis's shoulder. After walking for what felt like hours, we finally reached the village. It was a small, quiet place with a central square and a fountain. Vitalis led us to an open area and stopped. "This will do," he said. "Now Remy, watch and learn." He pulled out a small flute and began playing a lively tune. The dogs immediately sprang into action, performing tricks, jumping through hoops, balancing on their hind legs, and even pretending to march like soldiers. Julika, ever the little actor, mimicked the crowd, bowing and waving at the children who laughed with delight. People started gathering around us, intrigued by the spectacle. As the performance went on, more villagers joined, forming a small but enthusiastic audience. I watched in awe. I had never seen anything like this before. It was magical how Vitalis commanded the animals with just a few words and gestures. When the performance ended, Cappy took a small wooden bowl in his mouth and walked around the crowd. People smiled and dropped coins into the bowl, laughing at the sight of the well-mannered dog collecting money. "See?" Vitalis said as he counted the coins. "This is how we earn our living. Simple, isn't it?" I nodded, still amazed. "You'll be performing soon too," he added. "You'll need to learn how to entertain." That evening, we left the village with a bit of money and some food given to us by generous villagers. As we settled under a tree for the night, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of excitement. Maybe this life wouldn't be so bad after all. Learning the trade over the next few weeks, I trained under Vitalis. He taught me how to move, how to act, and how to engage an audience. At first I felt awkward, unsure of myself, but Vitalis was patient, guiding me through each routine with precision. "You don't just perform," he explained. "You tell a story. Every movement, every gesture, every trick should make people feel something. Laughter, surprise, even sympathy." He was a strict teacher, but he was never cruel. If I made a mistake, he made me repeat the act until I got it right. The dogs, especially Cappy, helped me too. They had been performing for years and seemed to understand the rhythm of the show better than I did. Jolika, however, was another story. He was mischievous and often played tricks on me while we rehearsed. If I had to hand him a prop, he would snatch it and run away, making me chase him while he screeched with laughter. Even Vitalis had trouble keeping a straight face when that happened. Despite the challenges, I improved. Soon, I was part of the performance. I played the role of a clumsy assistant, a boy from the countryside who was outsmarted by the clever dogs and the witty monkey. The audience loved it. They laughed, cheered, and clapped for me. For the first time, I felt proud of myself. We traveled from town to town, performing in squares, markets, and fairs. Some days, we earned enough to eat well. Other days, we barely had enough for a crust of bread. But we kept going, relying on our wits and talents to survive. Challenges on the road. One evening, as we set up camp by a riverbank, a storm rolled in. The wind howled through the trees, and rain poured down in heavy sheets. We huddled under a makeshift shelter of branches and cloth, trying to stay dry. Jolika whimpered and clung to my shoulder, trembling. The dogs lay close together, their ears flattened against their heads. "It's just a storm," Vitalis said, though I could hear the concern in his voice. We faced worse. The night was long and miserable. By morning, our clothes were soaked, and our food supply was ruined. We had to push forward, walking in wet clothes, hungry and tired. There were days like this, days when we had no shelter, no food, no warmth. But there were also good days, days when the sun shone brightly, when kind strangers gave us a place to sleep and something to eat. Through it all, Vitalis remained steady. He never complained, never showed despair. His resilience gave me strength, and little by little, I adapted to the hardships of life on the road. 8. A new friend. One day, while performing in a small town, I noticed a boy around my age watching from the crowd. He had dark, curious eyes and a quick smile. After the show, he approached me. "You were funny," he said. "Thanks," I replied. "My name's Mattia. What's yours?" "Remy." "Where are you from?" he asked. I hesitated. "I don't really have a home." His smile faltered. "Me neither," he admitted. "I work for a musician, but he's not very nice. I wish I could do what you do." I glanced over at Vitalis, who was watching us from a distance. "Maybe you can," I said. And just like that, I had made my first friend. 9. The secret of Vitalis. One evening, as we walked along a quiet road, I gathered the courage to ask Vitalis something that had been on my mind for a long time. "Who are you, really?" He looked surprised. "What do you mean? You're not just a street performer. You speak so well, and you know so many things. You're different from other travelers." He sighed, looking up at the sky. "Once, a long time ago, I was someone else," he admitted. "But that life is behind me now. This is who I am now." I wanted to ask more, but he changed the subject. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his past than he let on. As the weeks passed, I grew more and more curious. Who was Vitalis before he became a traveling performer? And why had he chosen this life? I didn't know it then, but I would soon discover the truth. X. The harsh winter. As autumn faded and winter arrived, our journey became even more difficult. The cold was relentless, and the roads were harsh. Some nights, we had to sleep outside in freezing temperatures, huddling together for warmth. Vitalis did his best to keep our spirits up, but even he struggled. Food became scarce, and on some days, we performed for only a handful of people, earning barely enough to buy a loaf of bread. One evening, we arrived at a village just as a heavy snowfall began. The streets were nearly empty, and the cold bit into my skin. Vitalis led us to a small inn, hoping we could find shelter. The innkeeper took one look at us and shook his head. "No money, no room," he said gruffly. "Please," Vitalis tried. "We just need a warm place for the night." The man crossed his arms. "I can't take in beggars." Before Vitalis could argue, Cappy suddenly performed a little trick, standing on his hind legs and bowing. The innkeeper's wife, who had been watching from the doorway, smiled. "Oh, let them stay," she said. "Look at the poor boy. He's freezing." Reluctantly, the innkeeper allowed us to stay in the stable. It wasn't much, but at least it was warmer than the snow-covered road. That night, as I lay curled up beside Cappy, I wondered how much longer we could endure this life. I didn't want to complain, but deep inside, I longed for a real home, a bed, and a warm meal. An unexpected loss. One day, while walking through a mountain pass, a sudden storm hit. The wind howled and snow fell so thick that we could barely see ahead. Vitalis urged us forward, but the path was treacherous. Suddenly, Julika, who had been clinging to my shoulder, lost his grip. With a sharp cry, he tumbled down the icy slope. "Julika!" I screamed, scrambling after him. Vitalis grabbed my arm just in time. "No, Remy. It's too dangerous." We watched helplessly as Sholikor disappeared into the snowstorm. For hours we searched, calling his name, but there was no answer. The storm raged on, and finally, Vitalis put a hand on my shoulder. We have to go, Remy. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the truth Jolicoeur was gone. That night, I cried myself to sleep, mourning the loss of my little friend. 12. A dark turn after losing Jolicoeur. Everything seemed harder. The cold felt colder, the hunger more painful. Then, one evening, disaster struck. As we were passing through a town, 2 policemen approached us. They spoke to Vitalis in hushed tones before turning to me. You must come with us, one of them said. Confused, I looked at Vitalis, but his face was grim. What's happening? I asked. One of the policemen sighed. This man is not who you think he is. He has a past, and he is wanted for questioning. My heart pounded. No. He's done nothing wrong. But Vitalis raised a hand. Go with them, Remy. Do as they say. I didn't understand. Why wasn't he fighting back? Why wasn't he explaining? As they led him away, I shouted after him, Vitalis. But he didn't turn back. 13. A heartbreaking revelation. I was left alone. The dog stayed with me, but without Vitalis, I felt lost. Days passed. I stayed in the town, hoping for news. Finally, I overheard some men talking outside an inn. Did you hear about the old man they arrested? One of them said. Yes. Another replied. Turns out, he wasn't just some traveling performer. He used to be a famous singer. I pressed forward. What do you mean? I asked. The men looked at me in surprise. You knew him? He was my master, I said. The first man sighed. His real name was Carlo Balzani. He was once a great opera singer, famous across France. But something happened. He lost everything. No one knows why he chose this life. But now he's gone. Gone? My heart stopped. He died in prison last night. Everything around me blurred. The words echoed in my mind. Vitalis? Dead? No, it couldn't be. It had to be a mistake. But deep down, I knew it was true. 14. Alone again, I wandered the streets, numb with grief. I had lost everything: Vitalis, Jolicoeur, and the only family I had ever known. The dog stayed with me, but we had no food, no money, and nowhere to go. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be alone. That even in my sorrow, I heard Vitalis' voice in my mind. Be strong, Remy. Never give up. With tears in my eyes, I looked down at Kathy. We have to keep going, I whispered. And so, with a heavy heart, I stepped forward into the unknown. XV, finding a new path after losing Vitalis, I felt lost. But I could not give up. I had to find a way to survive. Cappy and I wandered from town to town, performing as best we could. I remembered everything Vitalis had taught me. And though it was difficult, I kept going. Some days were good: we earned enough to eat, and even had a warm place to sleep. Other days were miserable, filled with hunger and cold. One evening, as I was setting up for a performance, a familiar voice called out to me. Remy. I turned around and saw Mattia, the boy I had met before. He ran up to me, grinning. I've been looking for you. Seeing his cheerful face warmed my heart. Mattia, what are you doing here? I left the man I was working for, he explained. He was cruel, so I ran away. I've been playing music in different towns, trying to find you. For the first time in a long while, I smiled. I wasn't alone anymore. 16. A new friendship: Mattia and I decided to travel together. He played the violin while I performed tricks with Cappy. Together, we made a great team. With him by my side, life felt easier. He was clever, quick-witted, and always had a plan. If we were short on money, he found a way to earn more. If we had no food, he managed to talk someone into giving us a meal. You're lucky to have me, he often joked. And he was right. With Mattia, The road no longer felt so lonely. 17. Discovering the truth one day, while performing in a town, an elderly man in fine clothes watched us closely. When the show ended, he approached me. "You?" he said, looking at me intently. "What is your name?" "Remy," I replied. His face paled. "And where are you from?" I hesitated. "I don't really know." He studied me carefully. "You look just like her," he murmured. "Like who?" I asked. Instead of answering, he asked me another question. "Do you have any memory of your real parents?" I shook my head. "No. I was raised by a woman named Barbering." His hands trembled. "I think I know who you are," he whispered. "And I think I know where you belong." 18. Returning home, the man introduced himself as a friend of my real family. He told me that many years ago, a wealthy woman had lost her child kidnapped when he was still a baby. "You match the description exactly," he said. "Your features, your age. It all fits." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Could it be true? After all these years, had I finally found my family? With Mattia by my side, I traveled with the man to a grand house in a distant city. There, waiting for me, was a woman with tears in her eyes. "Remy," she whispered, reaching out for me. "My son." Tears welled in my own eyes as I realized the truth. I had finally found my real mother. 19. A new beginning. Life changed in ways I never imagined. I no longer had to wander the streets, hungry and cold. I had a home, a family, and people who loved me. But I never forgot those who had helped me along the way: the Tallies, Mother Barbering, and Mattia. Even though my journey had been hard, it had shaped me into who I was. And now, for the first time in my life, I truly felt like I belonged. The end. 14. Alone again. I wandered the streets, numb with grief. I had lost everything: Vitalis, Jolika, and the only family I had ever known. The dog stayed with me, but we had no food, no money, and nowhere to go. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be alone. But even in my sorrow, I heard Vitalis' voice in my mind. "Be strong, Remy. Never give up." With tears in my eyes, I looked down at Cappy. "We have to keep going," I whispered. And so, with a heavy heart, I stepped forward into the unknown. Finding a new path. After losing Vitalis, I felt lost, but I could not give up. I had to find a way to survive. Cappy and I wandered from town to town, performing as best we could. I remembered everything Vitalis had taught me. And though it was difficult, I kept going. Some days were good: we earned enough to eat, and even had a warm place to sleep. Other days were miserable, filled with hunger and cold. One evening, as I was setting up for a performance, a familiar voice called out to me. "Remy?" I turned around and saw Mattia, the boy I had met before. He ran up to me, grinning. "I've been looking for you." Seeing his cheerful face warmed my heart. "Mattia, what are you doing here?" "I left the man I was working for," he explained. "He was cruel, so I ran away. I've been playing music in different towns, trying to find you." For the first time in a long while, I smiled. I wasn't alone anymore. XVI. A new friendship. Mattia and I decided to travel together. He played the violin while I performed tricks with Cappy. Together, we made a great team. With him by my side, life felt easier. He was clever, quick-witted, and always had a plan. If we were short on money, he found a way to earn more. If we had no food, he managed to talk someone into giving us a meal. "You're lucky to have me," he often joked. And he was right. With Mattia, the road no longer felt so lonely. 17. Discovering the truth one day, while performing in a town, an elderly man in fine clothes watched us closely. When the show ended, he approached me. "You?" he said, looking at me intently. "What is your name?" "Remy," I replied. His face paled. "And where are you from?" I hesitated. I don't really know." He studied me carefully. "You look just like her," he murmured. "Like who?" I asked. Instead of answering, he asked me another question. "Do you have any memory of your real parents?" I shook my head. "No. I was raised by a woman named Barbering." His hands trembled. "I think I know who you are," he whispered. "And I think I know where you belong." 18. Returning home, the man introduced himself as a friend of my real family. He told me that many years ago, a wealthy woman had lost her child kidnapped when he was still a baby. "You match the description exactly," he said. "Your features, your age. It all fits." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Could it be true? After all these years, had I finally found my family? With Mattia by my side, I traveled with the man to a grand house in a distant city. There, waiting for me, was a woman with tears in her eyes. "Remy," she whispered, reaching out for me. "My son." Tears welled in my own eyes as I realized the truth. I had finally found my real mother. 19. A new beginning. Life changed in ways I never imagined. I no longer had to wander the streets, hungry and cold. I had a home, a family, and people who loved me. But I never forgot those who had helped me along the way: Vitalis, Mother Barbering, and Mattia. Even though my journey had been hard, it had shaped me into who I was. And now, for the first time in my life, I truly felt like I belonged. The end.